Good morning, everybody. It's me, Mitch. I got up early this morning, and first thing in the morning, I usually kind of take a quick glance to see what kind of comments came in, because it's kind of a full-time job keeping up with them, and I try to see them as I go. And one particular comment from a viewer really piqued my interest. It went like this. He said, Dr. Sten Ekberg has just put out a video talking about what you just talked about in your last video about addiction and how to overcome the cravings. And he said, and I watched his video, but I liked your explanation better. And I was shocked. I said, wow, because I admire Dr. Ekberg. I think he's been around a long time. He's a very smart guy. He does very professional videos, and I very rarely, if ever, have a different opinion from him. So the first thing I did is I went to YouTube, and sure enough, there it was. It popped right up in my feed, and I watched the whole video, and I thought it was great. I was really, really happy with it. The title of his video was "The #1 best way to cure carb addictions," or I paraphrase, and I watched through the video looking for that answer to that question, the #1 best way. And he divided it into 3 different parts. The first part and the second part were talking about what addictions are and why we have addictions. And he went over a lot of the same theory that I put out there in my video about how we have to become fat adapted and how this happens at a cellular level. And I said, way to go, Sten. I said, this is validating my theories that I kind of came up with on my own because I don't hear people talking about them. And then in section 3, I'm waiting for the big finish. How do I overcome these addictions? And he talked about psychological things, setting goals and things like that. And when it was done, I said, well, that doesn't work. We've all done that. We've all been given that advice before. What is the #1 best thing I can do to overcome that addiction? Here I am. I'm sitting in front of the TV. It's 8 o'clock at night. I'm trying to get started on this carnivore diet. I truly believe that this carnivore diet is everything it's cracked up to be. I just keep failing. I can't make it past the first week or 2. My addictions take hold. I'm triggered all the time. I can set all the goals in the world. They don't help me. I'm a carb addict. It's a chemical addiction as much as it is a psychological habit. What do I do? And that's where Dr. Ekberg and I, in our advice, split. The thrust of my last video, and I'm going to put a link to it in the description of this video, as well as a link to Dr. Ekberg's new video, which I want you to watch because he makes so many great points in it. The difference between my advice and his advice come from the fact that I struggled my entire life until I discovered that one simple strategy to stop the addictions in their track that I hear nobody of all the influencers on YouTube, nobody talks about this. Nobody gives this advice. And I can understand why. It's not complicated. It's not even really obvious, but it is a hack. It is a biological and a biochemical hack that actually works It's the first thing in my life that ever worked for me. I've given this advice in every video I've made talking about how to get started on a carnivore diet. What do I do for the first 30 days of my carnivore diet? I think that people fail to comprehend the importance of this simple fact and what it can do to help all of us over that hump where we get a craving from some trigger and we fail over and over. We want to do this carnivore thing. All of the information we hear from all of the great influencers has convinced us that yes, this is the way we're supposed to eat. Yes, we understand about the ancestral aspect of it. We understand about the nutritional aspect of it. We understand all that stuff. But we just can't overcome a lifetime of conditioning from our biology to prioritize sugar and make us eat sugar when we try to quit. And that one silly sounding little hack that I talk about over and over again is when you get a craving, eat. Eat! Have food ready. The only single thing that I finally discovered after 75 years, and it goes against any conventional advice about curing addictions, is when you get a craving, instantly, before it has a chance to screw with your head enough to make you eat that stuff mindlessly, is to eat, is to have food prepared. Have a dozen strips of bacon cooked up and ready to eat. Have some hamburger patties. Now, anybody who's in addiction management will tell you to abstain from what you're addicted to. The worst advice you can give an alcoholic was, well, when you feel a craving, drink. Drink alcohol or drugs. You know, when you're a heroin addict and you feel a craving for heroin, it's to shoot up. But that advice, as silly as it sounds, is the only way to cure a carb addiction early on when you just don't have the willpower. And I don't care what goals you set, that's not going to give you willpower, because willpower is a biochemical impossibility when you're addicted to carbs. You don't have the willpower to fight those cravings. You suffer. And the key is to stop the suffering and the craving. Nip it in the bud. And you do that by eating. But the hack is you don't eat sugar. You don't eat sugar. You eat fat and protein. And that triggers satiety hormones, the leptin. That changes the balance physiologically. And that makes the cravings go away. And if you don't make the craving go away, you're going to give into it. That's the secret. It's the secret. It works. It's how I, old Guy Carnivore here, Mitch, after 50 years of up and down and failures of diet, finally a year and a half ago, had an epiphany that this might work. And I on an N of 1 experiment, decided that I was going to go from keto to carnivore, give up those last few carbs, and that I was, for the first 30 days, not going to allow myself to get hungry enough to have uncontrollable cravings for sugar. And I started doing this, and it was easy. And in a year and a half on carnivore, with miraculous changes to my body, to my physiology, to my attitude, to my brain, I have not had a craving at all for sugar, and my whole mindset has changed in the way I look at these foods that I now see as poison and have no desire to eat them. Stomp out the cravings within the first minute or two of when they hit you by eating the appropriate food, eating as much of that as it takes for you to stop eating naturally. And by that I mean, I don't care if you go through a pound of bacon and a half a pound of hamburgers and you feel eventually like you're just forcing these things in. That's when you stop. And you'll, if you think about it, say, wow, I really wanted that sugar. I wanted that ice cream. I wanted those cookies. I don't want to eat anything now. And after a couple of weeks of this, you'll find that those cravings have diminished to 90% of the way they used to be. And that now you can consider all of the psychological steps that Dr. Ekberg talks about in the third section of his video, because you will be able to control them. But you got to get to that point. And to get to that point, you have to keep in mind at all times the strategy of curing a craving and knocking it down immediately by eating as much protein and fat as you can, as quick as you can. I hope this means something. I want you to watch Dr. Ekberg's video, and there'll be a card at the end of this video pointing you back to my video from 2 days ago. I want you to watch both of these videos. I want you to hear that we're actually saying exactly the same thing, trying to explain it in a way that's easily understandable, using different analogies, but basically saying the same thing. Then I want you to notice that I think that I've given you an actionable thing that you can actually do the instant these cravings hit you to shut them off. Where Dr. Ekberg talks about how you should be setting goals, how you should be setting about what you want to do. Those things are great and they're valid and they're part of the standard of addiction management since the beginning of the concept of addiction management. But they do very little when the addiction takes hold of your chemistry and physiology, shuts off your rational thinking, and you find yourself, and I know you can identify with this, you find yourself mindlessly standing in front of the refrigerator, standing in front of the pantry, craving carbohydrates and grabbing the first thing that you see and eating it, and then punishing yourself later with feelings of guilt. What was I thinking? This has happened to all of us. The way to stop that is to eat until you're not hungry anymore, but eat the right things. I keep reinforcing this message because it's a different message. You're not hearing this from anybody else that you watch in the carnivore space. I never heard it from anybody else that I watched. I'm not downing any of the other great influencers we have. Everything they say is valuable and good. But they're, for some reason, en masse, missing this simple little trick, this simple little hack, which can mean the difference about whether today you're back to square one or not, and you can continue to build day by day on the small changes that are happening inside your body that in a relatively short period of time will allow you to sustain this for the rest of your life like I did. Think about that. Take the rest of the day off. Cook some meat, have it handy, and then eat it when you think you need to.